En el número 22 de Chapel Street, en el centro de Stratford-upon-Avon, se ubica Shakespeare's New Place, la casa de adultez de Wiliam Shakespeare, y la cual habitó durante los últimos 19 años de su vida. En 2010, un equipo de arqueólogos de la Universidad de Staffordshire, supervisado por Paul Edmondson, realizó durante 5 años excavaciones en este predio. La casa original fue demolida en 1759.
We discovered a lot about the size of the house, that it was a very impressive dwelling in the centre of Stratford. More than that, it was the biggest house in the borough of Stratford-upon-Avon. More than that, it was the only house with a courtyard frontage to it, which, when you start to realise what that looked like, with a gatehouse at the front of the house, which you went through, and then a courtyard at the back, and then this hall here, that becomes quite interesting in terms of how theatrical perhaps the architecture is for a playwright. So he buys New Place in 1597 and he sets about renovating it in some way. This has often been thought to be the case with New Place, but the archaeology has shown that to be especially the case. And also this front part of the house, this gatehouse, our archaeology showed us that Shakespeare probably rebuilt that entire front of the house because the form in which we believe it was in his time is different to the form that it had been 100 years earlier. 100 years earlier there seemed to have been, from the archaeology, shop frontages because it belonged to a merchant, Hugh Clopton, and Shakespeare seems to have rebuilt that into something much more fashionable and much more, as it were, upwardly mobile.
Pero los descubrimientos arqueológicos han permitido también replantear la vida de Shakespeare y su entorno doméstico.
And then that changes our sense of how Shakespeare's life was related between Stratford and London. Shakespeare as somebody who was an intermittent lodger in London, but who had roots in Stratford-upon-Avon in this large, sizable dwelling where, after all, his family lived. So that sets up in our understanding a commuting Shakespeare who's going from Stratford to London actually quite regularly. Therefore, in the context of this retelling of the life, I've been able to look at connections between Stratford-upon-Avon and London in other aspects of the time. There was a carrier who regularly took objects to and from Stratford to London. He lived just opposite Shakespeare's first family home on Henley Street. His name was William Greenaway. And all of this information is borne out in the Stratford records, the archives, which we look after at the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, but which we've been able to look again, as it were, with fresh eyes.
Y más aún, la evidencia arqueológica encontrada permite ver las dinámicas de un hogar de la época.
How what we found reaffirms the ordinariness of Shakespeare, the day-to-day existence, the domesticity, the uncompromising facts of ordinary life, foodstuffs, pottery, drinking vessels, games, cottage industries. And it allows us to reimagine and understand about how the family, how the people living there had to generate wealth for themselves through cottage industries, for example, through the making of malt, from which you could make beer because the water wasn't safe to drink. And there's that document, isn't there, about Shakespeare having too much malt in a time of shortage in Stratford-upon-Avon.
Dum, dum, dum.